Welcome to Beyond the Lab, a series by the Office of Career Development within the Biomedical Research, Education, and Training Department of the Vanderbilt University School of Medicine. I'm Kate Stewart, and I'm here today with Efrain Garcia, who graduated with his degree in pharmacology in 2007. So I'm so glad you're back. Welcome back.
Thank you, Kate.
So tell me a little bit about what you did here at Vanderbilt when you were here.
I was a graduate student in the Department of Pharmacology in the laboratory of Elaine Sanders Bush, who is no longer with Vanderbilt, but she was here for over 30 years. And my research focused on studying G proteins and how they are related to hallucinogenic drug action.
Okay.
The title of my thesis was actually Unraveling the Role of G proteins in Hallucinogenic Drug Action. And I was here for a little over 6 years. And then after that, I did a small postdoc also here at Vanderbilt, at the Vanderbilt University Institute of Imaging Science. Mm-hmm. And I did a clinical fMRI. And after my postdoc, then that's when I started my career, which I presume you're going to ask.
Yes, I'm going to ask you next. Tell me about your path since your time here at Vanderbilt.
So I was one of those, I guess not so much nowadays, but in the past, I was one of those students that knew from very early on that bench science, although important and very interesting, maybe wasn't the path that I wanted to follow. So very early on in my career, I started looking at different ways for me to become a better candidate for a different career path. I thought I was good with people. Maybe I could do some PR for a pharmaceutical company, considering that I have the science and the people skills for that. But then I found an advertisement for the AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellowships. I found it to be very interesting because that addressed what I always said that I wanted to do, which was big picture science. So I want to see the impact of science beyond the lab, if I could use the term. And so since then, I started thinking, and my mentor, who was terrific, the both of us started thinking about what I could do to become the best candidate possible to become a AAAS fellow. So at that point, I started volunteering for every seminar, every symposium at Vanderbilt to organize it. I volunteered at the Adventure Science Center. I met with members of Congress in DC and in Nashville. I organized a symposium for neuroscience and brain disease burden in Zambia, in Africa. I did everything in my power, at least anything I could do, to make sure that I would be a qualified candidate for the AAAS fellowships, and fortunately I was able to get it. I interviewed in 2 different tracks, a diplomacy track and a health education and human services track. I chose the latter one. And how the AAAS does this is that after you go through the application process, which is quite lengthy, I don't know if you want me to talk about that.
Sure.
You first have to fill out an application, and they give you different criteria, and it's pretty much trying to understand where you come from, where your scientific skills are, and how you have applied those science skills outside of the lab. So they want to make sure that you are a well-rounded individual, that you are not only able to perform good science, but you're able to communicate it and apply that science, again, outside of the lab. So after that first step, once your application is selected, which is a very intensive process, and it's a lengthy application, you have to make sure that you follow the parameters they have in their website as to what an application needs to look like. Following that, you become a semi-finalist, and at that point, you have an oral interview, which is a 30-minute interview, and they ask you to write a briefing memo, which I didn't know what a briefing memo is. I think the majority of us wouldn't know what a briefing memo is, but the beauty of becoming a PhD is that if you don't know it, you can't figure it out. So you figure it out. I wrote my 1-page briefing memo. A couple of weeks later, you have an interview. They ask you questions about the briefing memos, your briefing memo, questions about you, and questions about how, something that is related to policy issues of today and your views on them. And then they give you a closing statement, and then that determines whether you become a finalist. And what it means to be a finalist is that then you are able to interview in different agencies within your track. Since I was in 2 tracks, I was able to interview in State Department and things related to diplomacy, as well as NIH, NSF, HHS. And I ended up at HHS at the Office of the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority, or BARDA. And we're in charge of funding the advanced development and procurement of medical countermeasures for chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear threats, as well as pandemic flu. We act as a venture capitalist in the government, pretty much, because these things don't have a commercial value. A lot of them, antibiotics could, but like say, vaccine for anthrax is not something that people go to CVS to buy. So we have to give these companies the incentive to go. We say you get them through early on research with presumably NIH money. But once you get to that spot, we are able to provide funding for you to conduct advanced research, phase 1, phase 2, and then leading to regulatory approval if the product is successful and shows efficacy and safety. And then for some products, if we have a requirement for procurement, then we are able to purchase those medical countermeasures. And then we also interact with many different agencies, because once they are purchased by us or procured by us, they are CDC would manage the stockpile. So that was pretty much my path. Initially, I started doing policy when I came to my fellowship, and that policy related to the development of requirements for these drugs that I was talking about. Then afterwards, I also did some international preparedness and response. I was the branch chief of international partnerships for biosecurity and preparedness and international preparedness and response, things like Ebola, things like MERS coronavirus, SARS. And then again, I went back to BARDA, and which I now manage these projects for the advanced development of medical countermeasures for chemical threats.
Okay.
So that's my long spiel about what I've done after grad school.
Okay, good. No, that's a great path. But what do you do every day? Like, you walk into the door. What's a typical day look like for you?
Well, I'm sure it does obviously vary day by day, but in a nutshell, what we provide by being the managers of these multi-million-dollar contracts is that we ensure that these companies are producing the data that we need, that they would need for regulatory approval, but that we think that they would need for this pathway leading to regulatory approval. So we interact with them very regularly. We have teleconferences, we do site visits, we review their reports, and we also, something that is very unique is that we provide subject matter expertise to them too. So we are a resource for these companies. So we're not only funding the development of these things, but we have teams of experts where we work, and we're able to provide this expertise to these companies, which is it is very beneficial for them, because we have direct interactions with FDA, we have direct interactions with NIH. So we're able to provide guidance as to where they should go with this product. So we have constant interaction with them. We also have interagency meetings in which we talk about, because a lot of the things that we do, say, especially in the chemical field where I concentrate mostly now, DoD, Department of Defense, also has a program for that. So we want to ensure that we are joining forces to ensure that we all have a common goal, although they are more for the war fighter and we are for the civilians. We want to make sure that the products are being developed in a cohesive manner, to make sure that we are not reinventing the wheel agency through agency. We also need to interact with FDA to ensure that we are able to get these drugs to regulatory approval, which is, we have something called the animal rule, because a lot of these drugs, you cannot give anthrax to a person. So what these companies have to show to get these products approved is that they are efficacious in at least 2 animal models, but safe in humans. And then once you prove that, demonstrate that, then you are able to then proceed into the regulatory pathway. And if you're lucky, then your product will be approved. So we are always monitoring these things. So in a typical day, I have teleconferences, or I could be flying to their locations to do a site visit, or I could be reviewing proposals for funding. So it varies day by day. Like when I go back, I have this big review of 200 pages proposals for a contract. So that's something else that we do. So although it's not bench science, I get to see a lot of what I told you at the beginning, a lot of the big picture science, which is what I enjoy most. So I find it very satisfying.
Okay, so I'm sure you have to have a lot of skills in your tool belt to really do your job. What are some of the skills that you took from your PhD training that you use now? And then what are some skills that you would have had to gain in your role now?
So when you're in graduate school, you are pretty much managing a project, right? You have your project, you have to manage it, you have to manage expectations. You have to learn how to deal with failure, which I think it's pretty much what graduate school trains you for, because you do an experiment, it doesn't work, tweak it here, do it again, doesn't work, tweak it here. But all that, there's a lot of failure, but you are trained to see how to deal with this failure and how to steer a problem until you find a given solution. So all those project management skills, all organizational skills that you learn in graduate school, but particularly the problem-solving aspect of graduate school has been very helpful and very translatable to what I do nowadays. I deal with, contractors. And something that I think was helpful for me too was, particularly in pharmacology, we had a communications class and we present in lab meetings, we present in seminars, work in progress. These interactions with people are very, very helpful because when you go into these positions, you no longer interact with mice, which they don't talk back with you. So this is very interesting to, if you have those types of people skills that you could develop, and graduate school doesn't necessarily teaches you people skills, but it does teach you to deal with people of diverse backgrounds and manage meetings. All that is translatable pretty much to any job, but particularly a job that deals with managing a large project.
Okay. So what are some things that you wish you knew in your PhD training that you know now in your current role?
I would say that change isn't bad, because as a grad student, we are so used to being in one lab, having one project. Your pathway is pretty much the same, and then you get something in your mind as to what you want to do, and that is the pathway you follow. We're very focused, very tunnel vision. We have a goal and we go towards that goal. But when after I left and I realized, I might enjoy a job, but I might want to learn a different skill, it's okay to change. They're not going to hate you, especially if you don't burn bridges. Because in my case, I actually left the agency that I'm currently on now because I had a great opportunity. They understood it was a great opportunity. But at one point, they asked me if I wanted to come back, and I kind of missed the science that I do deal with, and I took that opportunity. And I was able to change again. So I have been in many different positions, I won't say many different, but in more than I thought I would be by this stage of my career, and that's a good thing. So just knowing that, relax, it's okay if you don't know what you want to do, because you can always change. And you don't necessarily need to get your dream job the first time around. So just learning that has been helpful for me.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for coming. Welcome back, and thank you for your time today.
All right, thank you.